Welcome back, everybody. So today's lesson, we're moving on, fourth lesson of the unit, and we're going to be studying fossils today. We're going to focus in on fossils. And you can see some nice photographs here. Once again, the dinosaur footprint and some other trace fossils here. First, remember that fossils are preserved evidence of past life. They are rare. Things don't usually fossilize. But because of the sheer number of organisms that have lived on Earth, we do find lots of fossils. But it is rare to have the conditions necessary for good fossilization. So what can we learn from the fossil record? The fossil record means all the fossils we find on Earth. Well, first you can learn about what life forms used to exist, past life forms. All kinds of crazy things have existed on this Earth, and things not so crazy. How long they've lived, what was the lifespan of some of these things? A frog versus, bacteria versus woolly mammoth. And even the abundance, how many existed by, just the sheer number of fossils we find of a particular organism. There's lots more than others. And even the diet, what things they ate during their lifespans. Also, we can learn about environmental conditions of ancient Earth. What was it like here during the time that fossil was around? And you can learn that just by looking at the type of creature that it is. Does it have fins? Is it a shelled organism? That means it lived in an ocean or a lake. Was it big? Was it small? And we can also learn about patterns of evolutionary change. And you can see in this photograph or this diagram here showing the evolution of the modern horse. 75 million years ago, the Eohippus didn't look like a horse, but it had some horse characteristics. But over the last 75 million years, it's evolved into what we now see on the right-hand side as the modern horse. So it had an evolutionary advantage to do so. The trilobite. Lots of those around here where we live, in the rocks. They're extinct now, but their fossils are still around. And you can see the question here, we find trilobite fossils embedded in our local rock, and that's the case here. What kind of ancient environment does this indicate? Now you can see the shelled parts here in this thing. Trilobites used to live under shallow oceans, and some lived in freshwater too. But we know that this area used to be underwater. That's what you can learn from finding all these trilobite fossils. Now, our reference table shows lifespans, another thing we can learn from fossils, with these black bars. And we already talked about this in the previous lesson, but you can definitely see in this zoomed in image on the right how mammals outlasted dinosaurs. And you can see dinosaurs, they started here, they ended here. Mammals started around the same time, and they're still going strong right now. And so that's how these black bars show time intervals. It's a longer time for mammals than dinosaurs. Yet for most of mammals' history, back in this time, we were just little small things living in the shadows of the dinosaurs. Okay, there's one specific type of fossil that we're going to discuss a lot in earth science, and we use it for a number of things, and they're called index fossils. You think of an index tab on a folder that kind of like points out something quickly to you. And that's what index fossils do. They're used to reliably point out a date of a specific rock layer. If you look in this big diagram here showing all these different layers, this fossil helps us index or date the age of the rock layer it's in. So if we can somehow find out how old this thing is, which is a Cryptolithus fossil, it's a type of trilobite, and we know that this thing lived in the Middle Ordovician period, 460 million years ago, then we know if we find this in another rock layer, like right here, that rock layer has been dated also to 460 million years ago. And over here, same thing, 460 million years ago. You might find it a little bit in these layers right here, but you're not going to find it up here because it didn't live during that time period. You're going to find other fossils. So in order to be a good index fossil, it has to have a couple different characteristics. First, these life forms should only live a short period of time before extinction or they evolve into something different. And that means that they're only going to be in that one rock layer, or very few rock layers in the Earth. You know, they just didn't live long enough as a species to make it into multiple layers. And second, they should be found worldwide, or at least widespread, so over a huge area. And that way they're actually going to be useful. And here are some New York State index fossils. And you're going to be using these things for all different kinds of questions. And some more index fossils of the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic era. And you can see a lot of these things are sea creatures. And you might wonder why sea creatures, there's so many of them. Think about those two rules, or those two characteristics to be a good index fossil. And you recall that one of them is widespread, or worldwide. And of course the oceans do cover most of the Earth's surface. So there's your answer to that one. So why is this a poor index fossil? We got a shark's tooth here from probably an old ancient megalodon. These sharks are extinct now. Pretty big tooth. I'll show you some others that are even larger than this. But why would this be a poor index fossil? Okay, if you said something about the fact that, you know, it's good because it was widespread around the world, that's okay. But the other thing is that there's still sharks around today. And now the teeth might not look the same as this, but there's still some big sharks, some great whites or other sharks that are pretty large. And so you can't reliably use shark's teeth as well as some of the other things to date rock layers, although it might be a little bit useful. All right, now we're going to delve into different types of fossilization. And the first one's one of my favorites, original preservation. This is a fossil where you actually find the flesh still intact. In this case, it's a frozen baby mammoth, and this is a rare form of fossilization, obviously, but this thing is really old, you know, at least 12,000 or years or older than that. Here's some original preservation. Got a saber-toothed tiger preserved in a tar pit out in California. And so it's not the entire thing preserved like the woolly mammoth, but still quite a bit of material there. And here's something, a freeze-dried human, you could call it that, but this particular unfortunate Native American, I believe this was in South America, in the Andes Mountains, was preserved because of the extremely dry and cool temperatures at that elevation. Okay, another form of fossilization is called permineralization. You can think of this as like petrification. There's a piece of petrified wood. The tissues in the material, for instance the wood on the left, is replaced by minerals from the surrounding groundwater. So the carbon is taken over by, in this case, probably quartz. And it forms a much harder material. This is rock hard. You can see some fossil coral down there on the right, and we do have some of that right here within a 10-minute drive. Stromatolite fossils in Saratoga Springs. We'll talk more about those a little bit later, but that was actually featured in a different lesson of ours because remember they made all that oxygen in our early atmosphere. Some more stromatolite fossil pictures. And here's some dinosaur bones embedded in the hillside. This is in Dinosaur National Monument, Utah. It's a really cool place to go. You can actually see the paleontologists working on the fossils as you view the museum. And they are embedded right in the rock. There's some more pictures on a walk I took outside. You can actually see a front leg bone from a giant dinosaur. That's the visitor center up here, if you ever go there, for Dinosaur National Monument. And you might remember this from Jurassic Park, amber. Fossilized tree sap. It traps the insects as it rolls down the tree. They get stuck in there and they can't escape. And this can happen with insects, bacteria, pollen, all kinds of things can get trapped in there. And then that stuff hardens up like, you know, kind of like a rock, and the things are preserved. Oxygen can't get to them. There's some close-ups of amber with mosquitoes. So you could actually take the DNA material out of this, you could attempt to at least, with some microdissection instruments here, and try to get a sample of the flesh of a mosquito that could be millions of years old. some amber trapped in insects, or insects trapped in amber, excuse me. They are pretty, and you can buy jewelry made out of this stuff, even with the bugs inside. And one of my least favorites, although it is interesting, you have to give credit to the paleontologists who study coprolites. This is fossilized animal feces. Contains evidence of past plants, seeds, the diets of organisms, days gone by. And you can see the plant eaters, lots of roughage, and the meat eaters, lots of flesh that's been turned into their dinner. Molds and casts. Perhaps you did some of this in art class. Hollow impressions and rock-like models of organisms. And here's some trilobite casts. A number of those in this area. Often around here, though, they're curled up into almost little balls as they die. And the top pictures show it's pointing to a mold there. That's like the hollow cavity, which is then filled in by material in the groundwater, and that's the cast. Now, the organism used to be in this area. It was covered by mud or silt or something, and then the organism rotted away and decomposed, and then that hollow cavity, which the rock formed around, was filled in with usually minerals in the groundwater, in this case probably calcium or calcite, and that formed a cast. So it's in the same shape, but it's not the actual organism itself. And trace fossils. These can be very delicate. Imprints, impressions. Here is a Eurypterid, you might remember, our New York State fossil. And there's some in the classroom. If you walk around, you'll see that large example in the back. And some more trace fossils. Here we have some leaves. And you might learn that these life forms are completely different than things that are alive today. So it's showing you how life has evolved. And some trace fossils of fish. It's interesting. Find out lots of these out west, like in Utah. There's a frog on the left, another fish on the right. And there's a big trace fossil, a giant imprint from a monster-sized dinosaur. And there's my size 12 shoe to the right of it. So you can just see how big these things were. This is in the deserts of southern Utah. And that's it. So hopefully you learned a little bit about fossils today.